All right, hey people, today is June 29, 2024. I'm Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. I do got a pre-recorded video I have done, but I want to add a few things before I play it because I notice I've lost a few hundred subscribers at least for attacking King James only, right? And there's a couple of things in this video. First of all, the argument I'm going to put forward, there's no King James onlyist that's ever gave me a good counter argument for it. Second of all, later on around the about the 42-minute mark or 32-minute mark, I can't remember where exactly it is, but later on I'm going to show you King James onlyists that got real hateful with me and decided to unsubscribe when I started talking about the King James only. Well, you're going to find out that you're the cultist, okay? Because I have proof in this video about someone who started the King James only movement. And it's going to surprise you because a lot of you started watching my videos because you're like, well, I'm against the Seventh-day Adventist. But when I started talking about your King James onlyism, and you suddenly want to unsubscribe from me. But little do you know that you actually are supporting Seventh-day Adventists by promoting this, because you know what, this came from them, and I'll show proof later on in this video. So I'm just going to start the video, present the screen, start the video. I'm trying to do it a little bit differently this time to see if I get more engagement if I make it shorter. So first off, the first about half hour, I'm going to go over the argument. Later on, I will play proof of other people explaining where King James onlyism came from, and I'll show you proof on the screen. So here we go. All right, hey people, today is June 29th, 2024. I'm Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. So today I'm going to try and make a shorter, more concise video that will be similar to my other video I made about the Hebrew grammar of Daniel 8. I can't remember exactly why I titled the video. I did it just 2 weeks ago though. So this is so it can be shorter, so it might give people a chance to include this in their own video so they can critique it and do a video response or whatever. And the reason why I'm doing this and I'm attacking the King James only and Seventh-day Adventism is because they both kind of the same argument works against both groups. That way, if I target both groups, I get maximum response, right? Because now I'm targeting two groups of people. And so now that's going to invite more criticism than if I just target one group like the Seventh-day Adventists. Also, there's a lot of scholarly people that believe in this King James onlyism. And so that way I also get perhaps better scholars or people that others might respect more, right? And then maybe if you see that these people cannot even properly respond to my video or give a strong argument against what I say, then you have to start to understand that the way a Seventh-day Adventist interprets Daniel 8 is wrong, okay? So basically, my argument boils down to verse 26 of Daniel chapter 8. Because in verse 26, and I'm going to just bring up, because it's hard to read the King James, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the Geneva Bible version here. Let me get myself out of the screen. So we're going to bring up this. This is the Geneva, which I think they have it pretty closely. They do a pretty good job on the translation. In fact, I think they do better. So when we get down to verse 26, it says, "And the vision of the evening and the morning, which is declared, is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it shall be after many days." The key parts to this, and you don't even have to know Hebrew grammar or Hebrew. Don't overcomplicate your thinking on this. I don't want people to go, "Oh my gosh, I don't know this. I can't follow this. This is way above my head." No, it's not. It's a real simple argument. We see the word "the" right over here, and we also see the word "the" over here in front of morning. So we see the word "the" in front of evening and the word "the" in front of morning. What that means is the evening and the morning are now in definite article, right? So that's the definite article. In Hebrew, the word would be erev, and the word for morning would be boker. So it would be, and the definite article would be had, just like ha ha ha, right? Ha erev and ha boker, okay? And so that means it's like saying the, like the continual. So if I'm in a setting of like the temple setting and we're doing a tamid sacrifice, right? Well, the tamid is like the Jewish word for the continual, or some people might call it the regular, or some people might call it the daily. But I've recently had some friends that said it would be better to call it the continual, because part of the reason why they did it evening and morning, which you can find a reference for in Numbers 28 and Exodus 29, they talk about the continual sacrifice, or the ha tamid sacrifice, the the continual sacrifice. And so if I just say continual, because they use the word to meet in other places in the Bible. But if I use the word to meet in these other places, it just means continual. Like he worked on this tamid for many days, continually for many days, right? So, but if I go the continual, it's got a different meaning when I start to put it in the definite article, and that's all I'm saying. So you don't have to worry about feeling like, oh, he's trying to talk over my head by being like acting like he's a Hebrew grammar expert. No, it's not all that complicated. Stop making it complicated so you can just go back to believing whatever lie you're believing. Okay, it's not that complicated. It's real simple. So whenever someone goes the evening and the morning, now it sounds like you're talking about like an event or a ritual or something, right? So the thing about so in the Geneva Bible, they also translate this correctly too, because in verse 14, well, let me read verse 13, because this is the question. It says, then I heard one of the saints speaking, and another one of the saints spake unto a certain one, saying, how long shall endure the vision of the daily sacrifice, the iniquity of the desolation to tread both the sanctuary and the army underfoot? And he said unto me, unto evening and morning, 2,300, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, the definite article is not in verse 14. It just says evening, morning, 2,300, right? So, but why would you say, okay, that's not proper grammar. If I say, I have 2,300 dog, I have 2,300 cat, right? That's not proper English. That's not proper grammar. You would always have it in plural form. So what the plural form would be in the Hebrew language, if it says evening, well, we know evening is erev, so it would be eravim. They would put like this im sound on the end of it. If it's masculine, they would put like an ot sound on it, like Shavuot, right? People heard of the feast of Shavuot, right? The feast of weeks, but that word is in feminine, right? So when it's in feminine, they put the ot on it, so it's Shavuot, right? So when a Hebrew person would say something in plural, well, if it's a masculine word, then it's going to have an im, so it would be everim, and morning is a boker, so that would be bokorim, because that word also is masculine. But when we look at this, we see that in the Hebrew, and I'll just kind of bring it up on the screen just so people can verify that these words are actually in the singular. So we see right here, boker, Arab, but remember it gets read from right to left when we're reading Hebrew. So Arab, and then boker. So we can see, and down here, I know you can't read when I put my cursor on this bottom part, unless you got a really big screen, but it says noun, masculine, singular, and then it says noun, masculine, singular. So these are in the singular. So it's really odd to put those words in the singular. Now, yes, in English they wound up putting it evenings, days, but boker is not really days. It's just the word morning. It's yamim if it's days, or yom or yamim. Right, so they would say yamim because the m on the end of it, that's plural. So anyway, so we see that it's in the singular. So part of the problem with the King James translation of this is that instead of putting evening, morning, they put days for the translation. They take out the word evening and they take out the word morning and they put the word days in it. But days is not in the Hebrew. It says evening, morning, and it's in the singular also. Now it would not make sense to say, oh, this is 2,300 day. You need to say days, but we don't. But this isn't in the plural. So now we got a problem. Either this person who is writing this supposed inspired text, right, in Hebrew, either they're really ignorant, or we, the translators, are missing something when we translate it into when we're reading this, right, or not even translating it, like when we're trying to interpret it. It needs to say these dumb Jews or God who inspired the text, he didn't know what he was doing because he didn't put it he didn't make it plural. God made an oopsie. Or wait a minute, are we making the oopsie, right? Maybe we're making the oopsie, and we should not interpret the text in that way. Maybe since we're reading this other part where it says ha tamid right here, and we know that means the continual, or some people put the daily. Like I said, I think the continual is a better interpretation. If I click this, you can see right here, all times, it's only translated that one time, always 4 times, constantly 2 times. But constantly and always is a lot like continual. And then continually 52 times, continuously 2 times, right? Perpetual 1 time. So that's why it sounds a little bit better when you call it the continual, right? Or some people, so we see that whenever you see the word ha tamid, it's almost always translated that specific way. Now, when it's just tamid, then it's like here on the side here, to make a lamp burn continually, but that doesn't have the definite article in front of it. It doesn't say hot tamid. And these verses right here, it just says it just says tamid, right? Or tamid, I should say, tamid. But whenever it has to do with like an actual sacrifice, it's always hot tamid, the continual. Okay, every single time it's translated that way. So, and if you read Numbers 28 and Exodus 29, it talks about here. I might as well bring that up on the screen really quick. Let's see here. Interlinear. I'll just bring out the numbers, not to just kind of keep this video short. But we're going to see that right around, it's not okay, the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, maybe. Let's see here. Oh, monthly Sabbath offerings. That's one of these. Oh, daily offerings. Here we go. Sorry, I didn't know it was right at the top of the page. Okay. Let's see here. I know it's right around here somewhere. You got to bring in and male lambs first of the year without blemish, 2 day by day right here. So down here, it tells us 2 lambs goes up here without blemish, 2 day by day. And right here, we also see the word leon, which means day by day. That's what that means. So that's that word yom I was talking about earlier. When it's in that, when it's like that, that means it's a singular usage, right? Here, it's got tamid, but this should be the definite article, right? Here. So this is the lambs in the definite article. I think this is definite article over here. But anyway, we see one you shall offer in the morning. See, Bob Bokur. And this is in the definite article. And then down here we got evening, definite article down here, right? So, and we got Abba Yum. So this is basically Arab, right? The same word, Arab. So I just want to let you know that it's the same word in here. This is where I'm getting that whole tamid sacrifice from, because we see tamid, we see boker, and then we see Arab right here, right? So so that's where I'm getting this from. So I'm not like just making up this whole sacrificial ideal or just pulling this out of nowhere, right? So when it's in the so it says 23. So in the previous verse, it was talking about the daily. And we know from reading Numbers and from reading Exodus, and I can't remember what part in Ezra, but we know from reading these passages that there's an evening, morning sacrifice associated with the ha tamid. That's what the tamid, the continual sacrifice is about. And when you read Revelation, remember when it says the smoke of their torment shall be everlasting, and they go like day or night. Oh no, hold on, now I remember it. The wicked shall have no rest, day or night. See, that day or night is like a merism of continually without rest, right? So when the wicked are continually without rest and they're tormented continually, right? That just day and night represent that, just like the evening morning sacrifice represent continual. So now when you have that word tamid, that means continual, and you also see that relation with evening and morning. That's why that's not like a crazy interpretation, okay? And it makes sense because now when it's in the singular, it's like, okay, it's talking about an event, a ritual. So when you have an event or a ritual in the singular and it's 2300 of this event or ritual, now it makes sense when you have it in the singular. And so when you get down here, so I'm going to go back to the, let me just go back to the Geneva Bible. So when we get down to verse 26, it says the vision of the evening and the morning, which is declared, is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it shall be after many days. Now, if there's 2300 evening, morning, or evening, morning 2300, and let's say you think, no, Chris, no, that means 2300 literal periods of parts of day. And you're going to argue with me like, no, it cannot mean sacrifice. No, I refuse to believe that. It's got to mean parts of a day. Okay, now the question, though, is on you to explain why in verse 26, why is it only referring to one of those particular evening mornings? Why would it tell us 2300 evening mornings or evening morning, which is also weird that it keeps that in singular. But let's say you want to say, no, it means parts of a day. And then when it gets down to verse 26, why is it focused on just one evening and one morning? Because when you say the evening and morning, the vision of the evening and the morning, wait a minute, I thought it was a vision of 2300 of them. So the proper thing to say down in verse 26, if it was a focus on literal parts of a day, instead of the sacrifice, then you would say the vision of Aravim and Bokarim, which is declared as true. Now, there's still a chance it could maybe be talking about the sacrifice, but at this point, that would an interpretation that it's talking about literal parts of a day would make more sense. But now one more thing that we need to think about is that if it was talking about literal parts of a day, why didn't it just say yamim in verse 14? Because, you know, he could have easily, we know there's an evening and a morning and a day. So why didn't it just tell us 2,300 days? And someone could be like, well, Chris, they want to make sure we knew it was definitely a day because we were afraid of Seventh-day Adventists that would come along and try to say it's years. So God wanted us to know it was going to 100% be a literal day, and that's why they did it. And they did not want people to ever think it could be anything else. But it still does not make sense because the focus is still on just one literal evening and one literal morning of those 2,300. The only logical reason I can think of for the author who wrote Daniel 8 to put the evening and the morning is because it's referring to an event. And one more thing I'll show you for King James Onlyist. And this is kind of going to be the cherry on top. When we go to verse 14, let me go to verse 26 first. Let's see here. Well, you know what? I'll go to verse 14 because I'll have to go to, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I can go right over to this side. Okay, so right here, just let me kind of blow it up a little bit. See, they actually translate it right in the King James because it says, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true. So they even have it in the definite singular article, right? I mean, the singular definite article. So by having it in the singular definite article, it's referring to only one specific evening and morning. That does not make much sense if there's 2,300 days, because we know there's more than one evening and morning. So why would you tell me about 2,300 days and then in verse 26 focus on just one evening morning of all those 2,300 and say the vision of only one is true? What? You mean this event just happens on one single day, or is this a mistranslation? And then on top of it, think about this: if you say this is a perfect Bible, we have a problem with verse 26 because, oh, the vision of the evening morning, which was told is true. Okay, let's reread Daniel 8. Wait a minute, I'm rereading the whole thing from verse 1 all the way to 26. I don't see evening morning in anywhere. Oh, maybe I got to read a previous chapter. Maybe I got to read a chapter before that. Maybe the chapter before that. Where was this vision of the evening morning? Oh, it's taken out because in verse 14 it says, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be clean. See, and when I was reading the Hebrew, I know that's evening morning, but that was taken out of the Bible. So now, oh, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a perfect Bible now. And now when I'm reading verse 26, the vision of the evening morning, well, King James is perfect. We know verse 14 can't be talking about this vision. So now we got to keep reading backwards and finding the chapter. Oh, it's lost. So now are we saying that this should be taken out of the Bible or not making sense or what? You know, it just doesn't make sense anymore. But then we look real close and we can see right by the word days, it's got this little cross by it. And when I look all the way to the left, I see the cross and I go Hebrew, evening, morning. See, this other cross is right before the word cleanse, and it says right here in the Hebrew it means sanctified. So the sanctuary shall the sanctuary be sanctified. So we know cleansed and sanctified are the same. So we know right this cross right before days. When we go over to here, we see Hebrew, evening, morning. So what it's telling us is that the translators are telling us, well, this is the original Hebrew, because you can see they put the word HEB period, then they put evening, morning. So they're telling us in the Hebrew, it actually said evening, morning, but we're going to put our interpretation down on the text. So now these King James Onlyists are telling us that the translators made a perfect interpretation, but did they really? Because now by taking out the word evening and mornings, I don't know where the vision of the evening and mornings was. I lost it. Unless you know the original Hebrew. So that's what I'm saying. The original Hebrew should have been put in there, because actually that's a better translation when you put evening, morning in there, because it's talking about the sacrifice, the continual sacrifice. And see the vision concerning the daily, the continual sacrifice. And down here, you know, in verse 26, it says the vision of the evening mornings, which you saw was true. Okay, so this is the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, right? That's in verse 13. So that's the vision of the daily sacrifice. I read you Numbers. We know the daily or the continual sacrifice is done in the evening and morning. So now when it says the vision of the evening, morning, which you saw was true, all we got to do is to go, okay, that makes sense. This word days should not be days. It should be evening, morning, because it's referring to the continual sacrifice. So if you guys think this is a perfect translation, you're actually double the amount of days this takes, because you could have 2,300 evening, morning offerings within 1,150 days. And when you read the book of Maccabees, we see that Antiochus sacrifices a pig on the altar of Zeus, starting in Kislev 15 of the Seleucid era of 145. And then the temple gets cleansed in Kislev of 25 of the Seleucid era of 148, okay? And some people will argue, oh, Chris, but that's less than 1,150 days. Well, what they never talk about and bring up is how Antiochus actually had attacked the temple earlier than that, which halted the sacrifices. around Tishri 26. And prior to that, he had just came back from having, he was going to go attack Egypt. And the Roman army came up against him and said, hey, if you continue this, you're going to have to face Rome also. And so Antiochus grudgingly turned around and headed back. And on his way back, I'm thinking he is getting mad and decides to, a part of him wants to take out his anger. And then I believe he storms the Jewish temple on a Sabbath around Tishri 26. And he removes all the implements that you need to do this daily sacrifice. And then that halts the sacrifice. And then later on, he comes and sets up an altar to Zeus, I should say. He sets up an altar to Zeus and sacrifices a pig. So that's where I would think you're the days you need. And you can easily get from where I think it was Cyprus that this happened in, where the ships of Rome, or the Bible sometimes calls it the ships of Kittim. The ships of Kittim or Rome came up against him around, they say around June 26th, or maybe June 22nd or Savan 22nd. I think that might be. And so he's got plenty of time to move an army that big back to Jerusalem. You only need about 40 days. And he's got about a little over 2.5 months to do it, right? But he only needed about 40 days to do it. So you got plenty of time to get that done. And everything else fits, right? But I don't want to get too stuck on arguing about that point. The main point would be that this just wasn't translated correctly because it says evening, morning in it, right? And it's pretty clear it's talking about the evening, morning sacrifices. So one more thing I wanted to show, and so that's pretty much my argument, is that all you have to do is explain to me why the author of Daniel chose to use the singular definite expression of evening and morning in verse 26. So why was the definite article used, and why was it in singular for evening and morning in verse 26 if it's referring to 2,300 days, or if it's referring to 2,300 evenings and mornings that are parts of a day, right? And I cannot think of any reason, so that's why I say this is the best reason I can think of. And I will just go ahead and read this before I move on to my final point, which is that King James Onlyism looks like it was started by Seventh-day Adventist. But anyway, I'll read this part. It says the singular usage of evening and morning in Daniel 8:26, coupled with the definite article, suggests a reference to a singular entity or a concept rather than a numerical count of days. This linguistic choice aligns with the Hebrew practice of using the singular to denote a regular ongoing action or event. In context of the Hebrew sacrificial system, evening and morning would naturally refer to the daily sacrifices, a ritual that occurs each evening and morning without fail. The absence of a plural form in verse 26, despite the mention of 2,300 evenings and mornings in verse 14, indicates the focus is not on the quantity of days, but on the continuity of a specific ritual practice. The text seems to emphasize the disruption and eventual restoration of this daily ritual, rather than providing a tally of individual days. Therefore, the most coherent interpretation of the singular evening and morning in Daniel 8:26 is that it points to the daily ritual of sacrifices. This interpretation is substantiated by the broader scriptural context, which frequently associates evening and morning with the temple sacrifice rites. The singular form in this case serves to underscore the prophetic concern with the integrity of worship practice rather than the passage of time. So you would have to counter that. So final things before I go would be this interesting part of an old video I found from, this must have been how many years ago? I think this was like, 13 years ago. So this is interesting because I want you to hear this, not from just me, but from other people that people might respect more, because they might be like, well, who are you, Chris Lucas? So let's see what they have to say.
Refuge. Perhaps the most influential book in this whole controversy was one published by David Otis Fuller in 1970. The controversy is this. There are some who have taken the position that the only valid English translation of the Bible is the King James Version, that it is the only one that can be depended upon, its text is the only correct Greek text, and that its translation is the only one that is reliable. In fact, many claim that it is infallible, that it is inspired equally with the original Greek and Hebrew, and that one man even claims that if you find a difference between the Greek of the New Testament and the English of the King James, you should change the Greek to conform to the...
Could you say that the King James Version of the Bible became to Protestantism what the Latin Vulgate became to the Roman Catholic Church in the Dark Ages?
Well, exactly so. In fact, historically, there have been four times that people have made claims that a translation was inspired equal with the original or superior to it. In the time of Irenaeus, the 2nd century, he was one of the early Christian writers. He was in Lyon, France. He claimed that the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, was inspired equal with the Hebrew. It was primarily a self-serving claim. He didn't know any Hebrew, but he had a Greek Old Testament, so he claimed that that was inspired. And some others picked up on that. Later on in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church more or less canonized or idolized the Latin Vulgate translation of Jerome. It's a good translation, but it's not inspired equally with the Greek. And when Erasmus came out with a revised Greek, came out with his Greek New Testament in 1516, he also published in a parallel column a revision of the Latin Vulgate. And when he did that, the egg hit the fan, because now the Catholic priests, many of them said, "How dare you touch the inspired, infallible Vulgate translation?" Well, at the time of Luther, after he completed his New Testament translation, some of his followers said, "Why, Mr. Luther, this is equally inspired with the original." Luther scotched that immediately, said, "No, what I have written is not inspired like the originals. I have labored to translate accurately, but only the originals are infallible, not my translation." Well, since 1950 or so, among primarily Baptists, people have begun to claim that the King James Version is inspired and infallible, perfectly preserved, and that it has no errors of translation, cannot be improved in any way, should not be upgraded, altered, revised, or any such thing. This claim has arisen primarily through the influence of one major book, that's Which Bible, which was done by David Otis Fuller. You have his picture there on the booklet. David Otis Fuller was a Baptist preacher for many years. In fact, he edited several of Spurgeon's works for publication by Kregel Publications up in Grand Rapids. So he had a familiarity with Spurgeon, which is one reason why I wrote the book. He does not deal honestly with what he knew Spurgeon believed. He edited a book called Which Bible, and that book, Which Bible, was made up 46% of a reprint of the writings of a man named Benjamin G. Wilkinson. I read Which Bible when I was in Bible college, and I always wondered, who is this Wilkinson guy? I looked for years to try and find out who Wilkinson is, and I couldn't find any reference. All Fuller said was that he taught at an obscure Bible college in the East somewhere. Well, through a contact that Gary Hudson had, we discovered that Benjamin G. Wilkinson was a missionary, a theology teacher, and a college president in the Seventh-day Adventist cult.
Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah, Fuller knew that this man Wilkinson was a cultist, a propagator of the false doctrines of the Adventists. Now, for example, some people may not know what the Adventists believe. They teach the soul sleep, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses do. That is, that a person has no conscious existence after death until the resurrection. They teach that a man is kept not by grace, but by the works of the law. The Adventists historically have taught that Ellen G. White was a true prophetess of God, inspired equally with Moses and David and Jeremiah, even though recently they've discovered that much of her writing was plagiarized from other books of her day. They have also taught that if you have worshipped on Sunday, then you have accepted the mark of the beast and there is no salvation for you. That's historically some of the aberrant theology of the Adventists. Well, Wilkinson was a propagator of these false views, and he wrote a book in 1930 called Our Authorized Bible Vindicated. Well, that book was picked up and reprinted, a large portion of it, by Fuller in Which Bible. He deceived the readers by concealing the identity of Wilkinson. We have learned from one of Fuller's associates that he did that deliberately because he knew that Bible-believing Baptists would not accept as authoritative the writings of occultists. And he is absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And he has deceived tens of thousands of people who have read his book and believe it is true. Wilkinson also had a problem with getting his historic facts straight. His whole purpose in writing this book, Our Authorized Bible Vindicated, was to defend the King James against the English Revised Version, which came out in the 1880s. The reason he wanted the King James instead of the English Revised Version was because the English Revised Version, translating more literally than the King James in many passages, robbed the Adventists of some favorite proof texts. For example, Hebrews 9:27. The King James says, "It is appointed unto men once to die, and after this, the judgment," with a definite article. And of course, the Adventists say their soul sleep until the judgment. But that's not, the Greek has no definite article there, and the English Revised Version leaves it out in translating literally. And after death, what? Judgment, which implies conscious existence. Mm-hmm. Well, the Revised Version robbed the Adventists of one of their cultic proof texts, and that is why he favored the King James. Not because it was more accurate, but because it provided proof text for them. Another passage in the book of Acts chapter 13, in the King James text, it talks about the Gentiles gathering together with the Jews on the Sabbath day. Well, the Adventists wanted a proof text to show that in reality, Gentiles worship on the Sabbath too. And so he rejected the Revised Version, which translated it according to the Greek text and translated it differently so that it does not clearly teach that this does not clearly provide this Adventist proof text.
Well, Doug, did I understand you to say that Fuller had used this man without revealing that he was an Adventist?
Oh, absolutely. Fuller knew who he was. In fact, Fuller waited until 1970 to publish Which Bible, because Benjamin Wilkinson did not die until 1968. And he did not want anybody going to Wilkinson to find out who he was and what his beliefs were.
And you and Gary Hudson were the first to discover the background of this man that
Yes.
Fuller was using.
Yes.
And his book was written when?
1930. Well, the original was written in 1930. Fuller reprinted a major portion of it, about 2/3 of this cultist book, in 1970.
In 1970. And then when did you and Gary expose the fact that Fuller had used the Adventist book?
Around 1989.
Well, that's what, like 19 years?
Yes, 1920.
And I'm personally acquainted with Robert Kregel, who's I count him to be a good friend of mine. And I can't hardly believe that Kregel was party to this lack of
ethics.
This concealment.
Right. No, we wrote to Kregel and asked them if they were aware of the identity of Wilkinson. It came as a complete shock to them. They had probably some of Fuller's stuff previously, for example, an edited edition of the commentary by Spurgeon on Psalms and some other books, Valiant for the Faith, which was a book about Spurgeon. And so they had prior dealings with Fuller, and so they didn't check it out to see who it was. They merely went on his recommendation and reprinted Which Bible. And they have told us that since that date, they have ceased the publication of Which Bible.
Well, I know there's a lot of Christian bookstores, including my own, which when Fuller's book first came out, this controversy and cultic spirit that's been generated since, we weren't aware of it if it existed. And we did sell some of his books, and I'm sure many other Christian bookstores, but we were certainly unaware that the bulk of that book was just repeating what a Seventh-day Adventist had written.
And to conceal Wilkinson's identity even more, sometimes Wilkinson would quote from Ellen G. White, the Seventh-day Adventist prophetess, and would footnote that came from her book, The Great Controversy. Fuller, in reprinting that deleted the reference to Ellen G. White so that no one would know that this was Adventist material.
Now, there was a follow-up book to which Bible?
Right.
And I don't recall the name of it.
Well, there were actually two. One was called True or False, and the other was called Counterfeit or Genuine, which were primarily...
Two follow-ups?
Yes, neither one of them reproduced any of Wilkinson stuff. They were primarily focusing on materials written by J.W. Bergen, who was an Anglican bishop of 100 years ago.
Now, I noticed that Bergen or Bergon, however that's pronounced, is often thrown out as an authority by a lot of the people who promote the King James, well, at least the Textus Receptus text. Why don't you...
Okay, so I just mainly want to play the King James only stuff. If anyone wants to watch this, you can see that, you know, you can find this video on See Answers TV, and you just look this up, type this in on YouTube, and you can find it. But so anyway, and that was probably the part between about the 6-minute and 40-second mark all the way to about the 16-minute and 40-second mark. So I got about 10 minutes there of this video. That 10 minutes covers that part about the 17 minutes. So I thought that was real interesting. Let's see if I can bring up this book, Our Authorized King James. See if I can find this. Maybe it's called Our Authorized Bible. Oh, Our Authorized Bible Vindicated. So, so let's see here. You can find this on. I just want to go to just the table of contents because I think this is what's going to be. So if anyone wants to find this, you can go type that in, and you can find that on archive.org if you want to read this book. I just want to go over here and show you that a lot of this stuff, you probably heard this from King James Onlyist, right? All these things like fundamentally only two different Bibles, the Bible adopted by Constantine and the pure Bible of the Waldenses. The Reformers reject the Bible of the papacy, the Jesuits and the Jesuit Bible of 1582, the King James Bible born amid the greatest struggles over the Jesuit version. You know, because you've heard these in typical videos like James Dorr and many other people like that where they're trying to promote the King James Bible. I heard this one guy the other day, and he was making it sound like people were dying for the King James Bible and giving their lives to create it. And it was dishonest because the King James used Bibles that people died for, but no one died for the King James Bible while making it, right? I mean, but what they were doing, they were taking things like the stories of Tyndale and Wycliffe, and they were like conflating it with the King James version. It's like, no, that those guys died to write their Bibles. No, the King James Bible was done in a very nice, safe space. And on top of that, there were things where the King James purposely made translations to help the church powers have more power. Like they wanted to get rid of the word congregation and change it to churches. Overseer, they didn't like the word overseer. They wanted to have bishop instead. That way it gave the church more power. So they wanted to change certain words of it. They wanted to get rid of certain footnotes that looked like it struck at the king's authority. Like in Exodus chapter 1, there's a footnote around the bottom where I guess basically, you know, when these women did not kill these Hebrew babies, it was like, it said something to the effect of like, it's, you know, I could probably find it real quick. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Go to Exodus 1. Let me just show you the footnotes at the bottom here. Oh yeah, here we go. So on verse 19, it says, and the midwives answered Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the women of Egypt, for they are lively, and they delivered ere the midwives come at them, and are delivered, I guess, as soon as the midwives come to them. Because the king of Egypt was mad because, you know, oh, these babies are still, they're still having babies, and the women, the Jews are still multiplying. So these midwives, they didn't really want to kill the babies, but they were saying, well, they're not as the women of Egypt, for they are lively, and they deliver them too fast. But down at 9, so when we look at this footnote, it says their disobedience herein was lawful, but they're dissembling of evil, right? Because so it's okay to disobey the government when you're doing something good, when the government's doing evil, so you're trying to protect children, right? Well, King James didn't like that because he felt like it struck at his authority. So he wanted those. So that's another reason why he wanted verses like that removed. There was also the word tyrant that was in the Geneva Bible several times. Well, that word got removed when the King James Bible got created. So people don't think that, oh, it's so good and it's supposed to be so holy, pure, and perfect. That's all a bunch of propaganda. We can clearly see that the Geneva Bible had it translated right when we were looking at Daniel 8:14. It said 2300 evening morning, right? Well, that's what the Hebrew says. King James comes along and decides they're going to change the Bible. You know, I just think when people promote a lie and say, oh, the King James is perfect, because I grew up having people tell me this lie, and it kind of upsets me because it's like, well, I was a little confused when I read that, because I was like, where was that vision of the evening morning? Because I didn't have a King James Bible where off to the side it had a footnote telling me, oh, we substituted the word evening and morning for days. Well, it didn't have no footnote like that. It just said 2300 days. Well, I'm reading that, I'm confused. Where was that prophecy at? Right? So, and I just remember little things like that. So when people tell me, oh, it's so perfect, no, it's not. They did not get some of the words right. There's other passages. This is just one. So this isn't necessarily focused on King James only. Like I said, it was only to give a criticism to kill two birds with one stone. So I can invite the maximum amount of criticism. So I can either see ways I need to improve my argument or show that my argument is sound. Because once we see that I get weak responses in response to this video, that can only show the Seventh-day Adventists are really crazy in saying it's 2,300 years when you shouldn't even say it's 2,300 days, let alone years. But then you still have to justify, even if you think it means literal parts of a day, you still have to justify why they didn't use the word day anyway. And you still have to justify, okay, so let's just pretend you were able to justify that. Now justify evening. Why was it used in evening morning if it meant a year? It seems to have a lot of focus on this evening morning, like it's got double focus on it. So maybe it means a literal day. And every time we see evening morning in the Bible, like when we read Genesis, it always means one literal day. It never means a year. You got to now show me even where evening morning means a year at. So if the prophecy of the evening morning, which was told, is true, and we know an evening and morning always equal one day at the most, then you have to show me when it didn't mean. When did it not mean a literal day? When does evening morning not mean a literal day? Because that part is true. But now you want to take out the part that's even true about it. Because now, oh, no, the Seventh-day Adventists are like, no, the evening and morning is not true, even though the Bible says it's true, because you got to prop up your prophet Ellen White, right? So you got to say, no, God, that angel lied to you guys, okay? That angel lied, and it wasn't actually true. Our prophet is true, okay? And our prophet said it's days, okay? And since it's days, we know it's got to, so you got to do that, right? Because what is your reasoning for, what would be the reasoning for saying in verse 26 to say the vision of the evening and the morning, which you saw, was true, right? So that's what it kind of sounds like to me. Is like you would have to say that, the Bible lied. You know what? Just one more brief little thing, so I don't have to make another video on it. I'm gonna go to, let's see here. Oh, I don't know why my internet's going a little slow.
Journalist, as Chris said.
So I'm gonna go to this little post I made because I want to make sure people understand it. I will say, everyone likes to believe that they're that guy in the middle of that circle, the guy that will just sit there with his hands folded and not salute Hitler. And they go, oh, I'm that guy. But a lot of people are not that guy. A lot of people, you will go along with your church group. You will go along with others. You will not be the only man in a crowd. And I don't care if you have a very small church or a very big church. A lot of people will go along with their little small church. And as long as they got other people going along with the same lie, they'll feel like, oh, I am this guy. But, it's just my little church that's different from everyone else. So that means my whole church is this little guy. And it's like, well, no, that's not it either. Because a lot of times within even your own little churches, you got to be this guy. You got to be that guy that's just totally alone with no one, no place to turn. This guy winds up losing his wife and his kids because he married a Jewish woman, right? And so he was forced to separate from him. But that's not my main point. I do want to point out this, though, so I can be real clear that the Seventh-day Adventists know they are lying to people because this comes out of a Seventh-day Adventist material. So don't tell me, oh, no, you don't even read Seventh-day Adventist material. No, because this comes right from Seventh-day Adventist material, right? So we see it right here on the screen and took a screenshot. I think this came out of, did I have it at the bottom here? I know on another screenshot I actually had the whole book. I think it's a 7-month movement. But anyway, this definitely came right from one of their books. And no Seventh-day Adventist has ever disputed that. And I'll show the thing. I thought I had it in the post, but I'll show the footnote. But anyway, I want you to pay attention to what's in yellow, because it says, on this basis, the Karaite Jewish year of 1843 commenced on April 29th, 1843, and terminated on April 17th, 1844. The Millerites learned that most Jews followed the rabbinical reckoning, and it was more practical to calculate the year by astronomical calculations related to the vernal equinox and the ripening of the barley and the harvest in Judea. Okay, so the Seventh-day Adventists are saying that the Karaites that they're following are commencing their Jewish New Year on April 29th of 1843, and they terminate it on April 17th, 1844. So that can only be 12 Jewish months can only fit in there, right? Can we all agree to that? Only 12 Jewish months, because Jewish months are about 29.53 days, okay? So they're about 29.53 days long. So that's why a Jewish month can be 29 or 30 days, okay? So, the most we're going to probably lose between a Gregorian calendar and a Jewish calendar it's probably about maybe 15 days around about, right? Maybe, well, I guess up here we got a 12-day difference between the two calendars, right? Because we know if but anyway, a Jewish year has 12 months in it. I think we can agree, unless it's a leap year. But we know there's only 12 months between April 29th to April 17th. We can at least all agree on that, right? That's less than 12 months. And we know a Jewish New Year has 29.5 days in it, right? So that can only fit 12 Jewish months in between that time, right? Okay, so we all know that. We got that settled. Now, let's see what Miller's calendar says. If you look at this calendar, I wish I could open this one up better, but it's got Viadar 13. Then it's got Nisan 1. But wait a minute, 13, I thought only, wait, I'm confused because it's got 1843 up here. It's kind of cut off. Sorry, you'll have to look at my community post, probably on a cell phone, because I don't know why on YouTube you can't look at the whole picture. But anyway, I wasn't planning on doing this part. This is just an added part. But you want to get a clearer picture of what I'm talking about, look at my YouTube community post. But we can clearly see a 13th month here, Viadar. So the problem with that, I wonder if I still have this open up here somewhere. Oh, hey, I got it open right here. Here we go. So we can see that William Miller says, according to the true biblical reckoning pursued by the Karaite Jews. But right here, we can see 1843, then it stops. So here's the new year right here, right? And so it's still the Jewish year of 1843 down here. But we can see Sabbat, we can see Adar, which is the last month. And now we can see Viadar. And then it starts this. Well, wait a minute. How did you get 13 months in between April 29th of 1843 and April 17th of 1844? I have yet to have a Seventh-day Adventist do that. See, this lets you know that they were making this up when they're making mistakes like this. Because if they actually knew Karaites, they could just copy their calendar down and they'd be starting from Nisan 1 of April 29th, like that previous document just showed you. And as you count 13 months, it wouldn't start. Nisan wouldn't start here. This would be Viadar according to you guys because you said 13 months. So, and I know people are like, wait, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm having trouble understanding what you're saying. I get that. So that's why I also am bringing this up. So we're going to look at this because I got this all written down for you here. Right. Now, up here, we can see Nisan, and just like with their document, remember their document? So Nisan 1 would be the 29th. IR would be the May 29th. So this is in 1843, right? See, I'm counting these months. And now we get down to Adar 2. See, I have the right Jewish months here. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Adar 2. See, it's April 18th. What's happening? You should have started your Nisan if you got 13 months. You should have started Nisan on May 17th. But wait a minute. That would mean your Day of Atonement would be November something. You got a messed up calendar, don't you? How did you get that to, because remember on his calendar, what did his calendar say? That the day of Nisan started on April 18th. He has it starting on April 18th. But wait a minute, he also said there was an Adar 2, a 13th month, a leap month. See, he's missing it. He miscounted something. Because if you count properly, like I'm showing you 13 months, he miscounted and he added a month or something, or he just doesn't know what he's talking about. I have yet to have a Seventh-day Adventist explain this to me. The best explanation is that they were reading a bunch of stuff. They weren't really communicating real well with these Karaites. This was all new to them, and they're making mistakes. Because I have yet to have a Seventh-day Adventist explain, why does Miller's calendar say this on it? Why does it have 13 months? And if it's got 13 months, and your writings clearly say that Nisan 1 started on April 29th of 1843, well then Nisan 1 of 1844, if there's a leap year, it's got to be in May. See, there's all kinds of stuff. But see, another problem with this is that Jews never have Passovers in May. No Karaites have Passovers in May. I have yet to find one. And people go, Chris, what about that Karaite group back in 1999? That one who just happened to observe the Passover on May 1st, and started their Nisan around April 18th. Why did they pick all years to start observing the barley? Why did they pick 1999 when it would line up like a Seventh-day Adventist calendar? Why did they do that? And where's all their confirmation that they got everything right? Did they really see? There's a lot of people that think they messed up their observation of it, and they question it. Second of all, when you look at their following years, it's all months earlier, like a month and a half earlier. wait, what's going on here? And see, the funny thing is, remember earlier when they hid the fact that one guy, Otis Fuller, hid the fact that he got his ideals from a Seventh-day Adventist book, and he just looks like he's just hiding it all. And you remember, like, the Seventh-day Adventists are not really completely above board. They're not really completely honest with you, because how many times have you heard them say, "Oh, we don't think Ellen White's a prophet," but then you do think she's a prophet, right? Or she doesn't say she's a prophet, and then you read all these things where she goes, "Oh no, I'm more than a prophet." I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I said she was a prophet. She actually said she's more than a prophet. Or they'll say, "Oh, her books aren't scripture." And it's like, no, they actually are, because if you try to say anything's wrong, like, they won't say one thing she wrote is wrong, and they interpret their entire they interpret the Bible according to her books first. Like, if she says, "Hey, Passover was on a Friday, on when the moon wasn't full on Friday," but yet Seventh-day Adventists will tell you, I mean, not Seventh-day Adventists, but anyone will tell you that whenever you have Passover, it's always on a full moon. But so if you have it on Friday on 31 AD, on April 25th, on April 27th, it would have to be on April 27th. So on April 27th of 31 AD, that falls on a Friday. And I don't even know anyone that's ever celebrated Passover as late as April 27th. Maybe, but I don't know. But let's say that even if that was possible, but the Friday is not possible, because that's on a waning moon. It's always on a full moon. But I guess if Ellen White says, nope, it happened that year, well, hey, we're just going to forget about mathematics and astronomical charts and everything, and we're just going to ignore Jewish culture. We're going to ignore the Bible. Ellen White said it's Friday. It's got to be Friday. See, that's kind of how they think. Just like, well, if William Miller says it, I know 13 months cannot fit into 12, but if Ellen White says it, I'm going to believe it. And that stubborn Seventh-day Adventist they'll lock into that cult brain, and I'm going to believe it no matter what. And I try to tell them, no, 13 is more than 12. And they're like, no, I refuse to believe it. No, Ellen White said it. Guy, come on, 13 is more than 12. No, Chris, no, it's not more than 12. It's like they're insane like that. Clearly, we see they got it wrong, right? And so when you see weird things like you cannot fit 13 months into 12, and we also see that Jews never celebrate Passover as late as May, and they never celebrate the Day of Atonement as late as October 22nd. They never do. The harvest is over with by then. And it's up to you guys to show me that that's not the case. There's been over 200 years went by since you guys started your relationship. Well, I mean, since 180 years since you guys started your religion. Surely you could show me all the proof of at least a couple of Passovers, and be like, look, see, there was other Passovers, and see, this is when the barley gets ripe, and see that it wasn't ripe until the 18th, and look over here, it wasn't you couldn't finish up the harvest until after October 22nd. So look, Chris, you're wrong, right? Or it had to be October 22nd before you could celebrate the Day of Atonement, right? And it's like, you guys show us that proof. That's not on us. You guys are the ones who have this crazy claim. Because look, when you're the first prophet, because if you don't think you're the first prophet for 1700 years, right? Because I don't know if there's any prophets. Do you guys recognize any prophet from, let's say, 200 AD to Ellen White? What other prophets were there? You guys really don't seem to recognize any other prophets. So when this woman comes out of the blue, and then you have a bookshelf full of writings that you say are scripture, because you say she's the spirit of prophecy, she wrote everything down, and this comes from God, and to disobey her is to go against God, and all this other stuff. You guys have to prove this. And when I see this weird looking calendar that I see no Jew keeping, and then we just see basic Hebrew grammar of Daniel 8, where it doesn't allow for it doesn't even allow for a 2,300 day interpretation, let alone a 2,300 year interpretation, right? Because it does not make any sense to put verse 26 in singular and in the definite article. That does not make any sense. The evening, the morning. Wait a minute, you just told me there was 2,300. Unless it's referring to an event or a ritual. So, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I really need for my video. Yeah, because this is the only way that can ever, verse 26 can only denote a regular ongoing action or event. That's the only reason why we can think of putting that in the definite article and in the singular. It's got to be referring to something that's an event that's ongoing each evening and morning. So I would say, the text seems to emphasize the disruption and eventual restoration of this daily ritual rather than providing a tally of individual days. That's the only reason why I can think it would be written that way. And it's up to you to come up with reasons why it would be written that way, and yet support your view. Like, why was it written in that way if we're supposed to come to your view? How does that help your view? I don't get it. If anything, it makes your view not make sense. So that was my presentation. I don't really have much more to say. Some people in the comment section were asking about show me where in her writings she confirmed this calendar, right? Those are in previous videos. I gotta hunt that down. I don't want my video to go any longer than an hour, and it would probably take me a few minutes to hunt those out. But I have posted that in other videos where she, I think it was right after. Gosh, I really have to go look. I don't want people to look at the wrong videos or waste a bunch of their time. But I'll try to post it in a community post when I find it. But there's about 4 quotes from her where she's confirming that Jesus entered the Holy of Holies on October 22nd. So she's sitting there confirming everything Miller came up with. There's no calendar, other calendar where she's like to go by. What other calendar would she possibly be going by? Right? I mean, she went by Miller's prediction. She even said all these like honorary things towards William Miller. So when you say show me here in her writings where she said that, it's like everything about her writings seemed to point to like being convinced. I mean, the whole reason why is because of this calendar William Miller came up with. That's the whole reason why the Seventh-day Adventist Church was started, because there was something called the Great Disappointment. So being delusional and not wanting to fess up that they just got something wrong and they just believed a lie and they couldn't handle it because a lot of people had their farms destroyed because they didn't plant crops. They went bankrupt, all this stuff, right? And just tons of terrible things happened to them. And some people just came up with believing in this. So they would believe that, oh, I didn't cause all those people to lose their finances and be ruined by getting them to go along with me and this thing I believed. Right. And so they concocted that, oh, Jesus entered the heavenly of heavenlies. No, just fess up to, and they didn't like being laughed at. Some of these people were laughed at. They were made fun of. It was hurting their pride. They were sitting there thinking that this thing was going to happen. They were making all these plans. And when it didn't happen, they were very hurt by it. Right. And it's like, oh, well, if these people are going to make fun of me or say things to me, I'll just have a vision, I mean, or whatever, they're just trying to come up with some way of coping with it. Because that's why it's called the Great Disappointment. And it was all based off of having everything so built around this thing they think that's going to happen and it doesn't happen. So what calendar would that be? What calendar did they go by? Didn't they go by William Miller's calendar? Like, that's why I don't even understand this. That's why it seems like it's kind of crazy to me. Where else would they have gotten this from? And I just showed you on the screen that you cannot fit more than 12 months between April 29th of 1843, just like that Seventh-day Adventist document says, all the way to April 18th of 1844. That would be the start of the next Nisan, right? So from Nisan 1 to Nisan 1 of 1844, you cannot fit 13 Jewish months in between there. But Miller's calendar shows a leap year. How did that happen? Well, if that's a real Karaite calendar, okay, first of all, you got to think, for it to be an April 29th, for Nisan to start as late as April 29th, that means there was probably a leap year that year. I mean, if you say, no, there wasn't a leap year that year, a lot of people, especially Jews, would think you're out of your mind. Like, where did you get this from? So you would probably have to. But now you got a calendar with 2 back-to-back leap years. That should be weird to you. So this shows you that something's not right. They got documents saying that they're starting their new year on April 29th of 1843. Then they're saying that they're starting the next Jewish New Year on April 18th. But yet Miller's calendar shows 13 months. Right there. I mean, just accept it. They did not know what they were talking about. I don't know how hard that is. How hard is that? 13 is more than 12. Oh gosh, okay. They can't fit it in. Therefore, they must have lied. Right. Okay. Move on. It's real simple. And now I'm showing you the grammar of the Hebrew. It doesn't make sense for it to say evening, morning, or the vision of the evening and the morning, which you saw was true. Okay, so now when we read it, I only see verse 14. If you read the Hebrew, it talks about evening, morning, 2300. Okay, well, why is it in the singular in verse 26? The only reason you would put it in the singular in verse 26 would be as if you're referring to an event that's an event, basically, right? Because it's the evening, the morning. That sounds like the event, like the Tamid or anything else you would put the in front of. The Day of Atonement, right? It's like the day, right? So why is it in the singular singular definite article? Why is it? That's what you got to do. And all I see is a bunch of complaining from Seventh-day Adventists, but I don't see an excuse. And the same thing with King James Onlyism too. You have to tell me why was that put in there. But hey, on top of it, where is that vision of the evening, morning that's true in verse 26? Right? Oops. Because I'll bring that up again. It's like where's if we're reading the King James Bible, the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Okay, so read this entire chapter and tell me, where was that vision at? Right? The vision of the evening, morning. As I'm reading through here, I don't see the vision of the evening, morning. It doesn't mention it until it gets to verse 26. I don't know where this is the vision of the evening, morning. Are you saying it's in a previous chapter? Because it's definitely not in this chapter anymore. It got taken out. Unless you read the Hebrew, and down here it even tells you itself. Look right here, the Hebrew evening, morning, right here. They substituted it. So it's like, come on now, that you substitute. That's where it went. But if you take out all the footnotes, now you don't even have it. That's my biggest argument is you don't even have it. So it doesn't even make sense. And it's in poor grammar, because now you're saying like, oh, God doesn't know how to speak grammar correctly. Because now you're kind of like insulting God, or insulting the angel, at least, who's telling him this vision, right? So now you're saying that God's messengers cannot speak good grammar. You're saying, oh, they're stupid because they said the vision of the evening, morning. But we know it's got to be more than one evening and morning. So they got really bad grammar because they're only speaking about one evening and one morning. It just sounds real ridiculous. Why don't we just admit that they got good grammar and that they messed up the translation? It should have been evening, morning, 2300. And it can say evening, morning because it's referring to 2300 an event, 2300 of an event. What's that event? That event is the continual sacrifice, which is done evening, morning. Now, okay, so now if I say evening, morning, 2300, we're talking about that event, 2300, right? So like that sacrifice, that offering, that evening sacrifice, that morning sacrifice, 2300 of those, right? And you could have a combination. So an evening, morning, 2300 of them, that would be one. And so that can occur over the course of 1,150 days. But regardless of whether you want to fight me on that interpretation, go, no, it's got to be 2,300 days. Let's just pretend like you want to just fight me on that. It still doesn't make sense for verse 26 because verse 26 is still in the singular, the definite article singular. Why is this angel telling us with bad grammar, the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true? Because now that's bad grammar. Because no, it's not. It cannot be, because you're saying it's not referring to one single evening and one single morning, but yet you're saying that 2300 evening, morning is talking about days, but we know if it was 2300 evening, like 2300 days of evenings and mornings, it needs to be in plural. Unless you're talking about just one single evening and morning, but why did it say evening and morning 2300 if it's talking about only one evening morning? It gets real confusing. It just doesn't make sense. So that's why it's like, well, it's the vision of the evening and morning. It's got to refer to that continual sacrifice. Because now if I'm saying the vision of, it would be essentially the same as the vision of the continual, which was told is true. And see, and it's like the continual would be the same thing as like saying the daily. I don't have to say the continuals. I can just say the continual, right? I don't need to put an S on continual. If I say the vision of the continual, which was told is true, referring to the sacrifice, but the focus is on the vision of the evening, morning, that part of the continual, which is told is true. And that to me makes sense because it's in the definite article singular. And so if that being the case, that's the only rationale I can make of it, because I know that just does not make sense to speak to me about evening, morning 2300, and then all of a sudden in verse 26 you're just going to focus on one single one. What? That's why I'm asking people. I mean, I know you guys want to fight me on this, but please hear the argument, understand that part of it, understand that problem within the text. If you're going to fight me on like, oh no, it can't mean the evening, morning offering that's talked about in Numbers 28 and Exodus 29. No, Chris, it can't mean that. Okay, then please explain to me why the angel chose to use that kind of grammar in 26, where now we were previously speaking about 2300 evening, morning. Now all of a sudden the focus is just on one singular evening and one singular morning. Why did it suddenly shift? And no one's addressing that. That's what I keep asking. Please address that argument. That is definitely a problem within the text. And if it meant days, you could have just put 2300 days in verse 8:14 and then said in verse 26 you could have put, and the vision of those days which was told was true. Right? You could have put it like that. And we would have known, like, there's no reason why you need to add the words evening, morning if it's talking about literal days. Why do you keep adding that? And if you would have said, okay, so let's say you would have said it this really weird way, you need to have it in plural then and say the vision of the evenings and the mornings, which was told was true. Then that sounds more like it's probably talking about literal periods of day, right? Like the evening period of day and the morning period of a day. But when you when you did not make it plural, it sounds like you're only talking about one specific evening and one specific morning of those 2300. But again, why did you tell me 2300 in the first place? It's like, that's the main thing I'm trying to get. That's why I think it has to mean sacrifices. So I'm going to let this video go. I really don't want it to be longer than an hour. And if someone wants to write in the comment section and let me know, but this is my argument I've put forth. I showed you that also King James Onlyism did start with Seventh-day Adventism. I mean, right here's that author once again. It's the Benjamin G. Wilkinson, Our Authorized Bible Vindicated. He is the one who started this, wrote this around, let's see here. I think he wrote this in 1930, somewhere around there. It doesn't have it on here. Yeah, put the date. I'm pretty sure it's around 1930 he wrote this. And this is where people like Otis Fuller, who popularized this more, he got most of his arguments from here, and you can even see it's like they're like very similar arguments, things you would hear King James Onlyists say. And and it's just real curious how he never bothered to mention that he got this from a Seventh-day Adventist, that he was influenced, that he used 40, at least what was it, like 45% of his book was based on this Seventh-day Adventist. So what I'm saying is, when you got to remember, I have a lot of people that hated me for pointing out errors in the past in the King James Bible. Especially when I got to Daniel 8:14, I was pointing out the things about the Seventh-day Adventist. So they thought, oh, you know what? I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm going to quit watching Chris's channel. But the curious thing is, it's like you don't even know that you got your ideology from these people in the first place, because this guy is considered the catalyst of the King James only movement. And you know what? I think I can actually bring that part up. Is Benjamin Wilkinson considered the catalyst for the King James only movement? I'm just curious, what might the AI say?
Benjamin G. Wilkinson, a Seventh-day Adventist missionary, educator, and theologian, is indeed considered one of the originators of the King James only beliefs. His book, Our Authorized Bible Vindicated, 1930, criticized new versions of the Bible that he believed were based on corrupted manuscripts. Wilkinson's work was later popularized by independent Baptist preacher David Otis Fuller, which helped spread the King James only beliefs. Wilkinson's assertions about the Bible versions, particularly his critique of the English Revised Version and its underlying Greek texts, resonated with those who later formed the King James only movement. However, it's important to note that not all Adventists who use the King James Version support the King James only movement. Wilkinson's influence was significant, but the movement itself is diverse and has various proponents with different degrees of adherence to the idea that the King James Version is the only valid English translation of the Bible.
Well, I just wanted to basically get a second confirmation, because it's like, I'm just randomly type that into the Bing AI just to see if is that a nutty statement I made, because a lot of times it'd be like, oh, no, you're wrong. And sometimes I think I'm right, and the AI will be like, you're wrong, but it looks like generally I'm on the right track. Just like because I know some people said earlier, when those people from C Answers TV, I believe it's called Christian Answers TV. I think that's what the C stands for. But that was a video from about 13 years ago, and they brought up this. And so I know some people are like, oh, that's just some way of attacking the King James only by associating it with a cult. And it's like, well, no, it really did get popularized with this guy. That this guy is one of the catalysts for it. He's seen as the catalyst for the movement. It was just hidden. His works was hidden. Otis Fuller never brought up his name connected to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Yes, he brought up his name, but he never said, oh yeah, this was a Seventh-day Adventist, because they didn't want people to reject this King James Onlyism if they saw that it was connected to a Seventh-day Adventist. So I'm just saying, before people just get mad at me and decide, oh, I'm going to just, Chris spoke against the King James, kind of realize who might have influenced this thinking in the first place. Like, a lot of people don't realize how much the Seventh-day Adventist has influenced a lot of Christianity, because they're kind of silent about it. Just like when they did that I believe they were in on doing that whole barley observation back in 1999. That's really weird that the first time a barley observation's done in the modern era, it just happens to fall right around that same date that the Seventh-day Adventists need to help confirm their Day of Atonement, right? Just so happens. But it's real weird that they also kept real sloppy records at that time. And we don't really have like, they didn't go and double check and make sure, oh yeah, this lines up with the fall harvest season. So we got added confirmation that we thought it should start late, and look, the harvest was even late. No, for conveniently, it kind of hit all the harvest stuff in the fall. So we don't know 100%. So that's just really weird. And you would think if the Seventh-day Adventists wanted to really prove this stuff. I mean, it's just really weird that it all just happens to start on that day of all days in 1999. And so that's why I don't trust these people. Yeah, I don't hold this, but yet people got influenced by them, and I think there's other influences that they do that people are not aware of. Well, I'm not obsessed with the SDA. It's just that they're very sneaky. A lot of people don't know about all these little things that they have influenced Christianity with, all this division they've caused, because this King James only stuff, it does cause division within the church. Just like with your all your little campaigns and propaganda that you guys do, which I'm not going to mention on this video, but I'll mention it on future videos. But you guys have been tied into a lot of things with the Catholic Church, walking hand in hand with them. And people should really watch that SDA Q&A video. Here, you know what? Before
Search.
I go, I'll do
Copilot. Notebook.
I don't know why that started saying that, but I'll bring up one more channel before I leave, and just show an interesting show. Yeah, this guy right here. Graham Hood lost his job as a Qantas pilot. Why? Wouldn't take the jab. And guess what? The SDA church wouldn't support him either. Really dropped the ball. Yep, you had to go along with the Vatican, didn't you? And you guys are supposed to be like the people. You guys sit there, let this dude just sit on an island by himself instead of supporting him. Oh, I got to go along with it. I know you guys keep saying, oh, the government, the United States is the second beast of Revelation. And guess what? You're working with the United States government. I mean, you call it the second beast of Revelation, then you go work with it. And then we also see, the Catholic Church doing this. 200, right? I mean, Catholic Church, Catholic publication, and you guys go right along with it. I don't care if you took the jab or not. You know what? Your whole church promoted it. Your church would not let people attend their colleges if they didn't take it. They said, oh, you're not allowed to keep attending. See, your church went along and they said, hey, oh, mommy church, what do you do? Oh, you punish people? Well, like our mother, we're going to punish people too if they don't take the jab. Remember that. You guys go right along with mommy church. That's your mommy church. And you guys go right along with it. You guys didn't stand up. In fact, you punished people just like your mommy did.